You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Greeks Gridiron. It is that time of the week again as we make picks for week number 8 of the USFL. 4 games on tap as usual, with a lot to discuss and a lot to get into. So make sure you comment down below. Let me know who you think is coming out winners in Saturday's games, as we are only discussing Saturdays in today's video. We'll get Sundays tomorrow, as we normally do. But comment down below, who do you think comes out victorious on Saturday? We got some really good matchups coming up here, but without further ado, I'm 16-12. We're above 500. That's about as good as I can feel about things right now with the way the USFL has gone this season. Let's make some picks and hope for a 4-0 weekend, shall we? Beginning with the first game of the weekend. This one starts at noon. It is at 12 p.m. Eastern time at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, Ohio. You can catch this game on the USA Network between the Houston Gamblers and the Pittsburgh Maulers. Gamblers are coming off of I would say a really discombobulated and messy loss last week with 3 turnovers altogether. And the Maulers continuing to basically show promise, it feels like, in some capacity or another, in one part of the game or maybe another, but not necessarily in all 3 phases at the same time, ultimately leading to loss after loss, despite feeling like they might steal a victory. It feels like every week with how close they are, but it just feels like they can't get a complete effort in all 3 phases of the game to ultimately pull off the wins that I would have thought that they would have at this point in the season. Looking at the Gamblers, though, and what I feel they need to do in this game if they want to come out victorious offensively: protect the football. It is very simple for the Gamblers so far this season. They are currently 4-0 when they only have 1 turnover or less, and are sitting at 0-3 whenever that number becomes 2 or more. So it's very simple, at least in some capacity. Protect the ball, and you're probably going to come out victorious. And I feel like when you look at a lot of their losses, really tight, high-scoring affairs, they're typically a turnover or 2 away from potentially pulling off a victory. On top of that, I know that Mark Gilbert is a stud corner, and the secondary is not necessarily the worst, but they're also not necessarily the best. I want to see them really unload the football, because that is I would say, the weaker point of this Maulers defense altogether. A really good and strong unit from top to bottom, basically, when you look at players within the secondary into the linebacking corps on the defensive line. They have a really good group from top to bottom, but they have struggled with the pass, especially over the middle some. So I would say uncork the football, let Kenji Bahar throw, but if you're going to be doing so, you need to make sure you can protect Kenji Bahar. Maulers have 16 sacks in the season, 3rd most in the USFL. They have no issues getting to the quarterback, but if you're able to hold them off and move the ball around, you should be in good standing. And with the Gamblers being a unit that whenever they're really balanced and Mark Thompson, is eating on the ground, the pass game tends to open up. And Kenji Bahar, again, when he's playing well, keeping the football safe, not throwing into traffic, they're a team that can throw the ball through the air with the best of them. So I like their chances there. If they start, if they get things going on the ground early, going to be tough against the Maulers run D that has been spectacular this season, league's best. I think the Gamblers have a really good shot. As for the defense, though, I think it's kind of simple what you need to do at this point. The Showboats a couple of weeks ago showed exactly what you need to do to really shut down this Maulers team, and that first thing is just lock up the run, which hasn't been too difficult because the Maulers haven't really been too great running the football, and I'm talking about outside of Troy Williams. Their running backs right now, Madre London and Garrett Groshek, their 1-2 punch essentially, are averaging just a measly 3.2 yards per carry. Nothing impressive there. They're averaging about 19 yards combined per game between the 2 guys, and they only have 1 rushing touchdown total. So they have not really been able to move the ball too much. So putting the Maulers in that one-dimensional zone where it's basically all on Troy Williams has led to some really fun outings for the Maulers, but not necessarily victories. So if you keep them in that one-dimensional state, you have a really good chance of pulling off the victory in this one here. The other one is, this is a very fundamental thing, and this is something that the Showboats did an excellent job of doing when they played the Maulers a couple of weeks ago, and that is to stay disciplined, stick to your assignments, and keep your eyes on the football. The Maulers like to run a lot of, trickery and just plays that'll keep you second-guessing what exactly is going on, whether it's motions or or jet sweeps or, run pass options or read options, whatever it may be that the Maulers are running, they're going to do what they can to make your defense take an extra second or two to kind of figure out what is exactly happening in front of you. As long as everyone is just, again, stick to your fundamentals, keep your eyes on the football and where it's going, look at everything that's going on in front of you, but don't fall for the trickery. You can shut down this Maulers offense fairly effectively. And again, the Showboats defense has come alive the last few weeks, and they put on an absolute clinic against the Maulers a couple of weeks ago, shutting them out with a big goose egg on the board. If you look at the film and what they were doing there, and you can kind of replicate that, the Gamblers defense has been a pretty good group for the most part. They struggle against the pass, but they are really good against the run. You have a really good shot of shutting things down and making this a comfortable victory. Whereas when you look at the Maulers offensively, and this is something I feel like I keep talking about week after week, and it really needs to happen if they want to be able to pull together any sort of victories these last few weeks of the season. You got to get something going on the ground. And even if it is just Troy Williams, if he has to carry the load at this point in the season, I mean, it's kind of a lot to ask for vast improvements when we're more than halfway through the season. We're literally working through the last few games of the year. You got to get something going on the ground to open up the passing game for you. Otherwise, again, you risk that, that you end up being one-dimensional, and if you can't really expand your offense, the Gamblers are going to swallow you up. On top of that, I really think you need to keep your passing game quick and steady. The Maulers' offensive line is just not suited for those long, drawn-out plays, aside from, if you can kind of trick them on something, but ultimately, if you're just, lining up in shotgun, things do not really go well for the Maulers in that case. I think you need to keep your pass game quick and steady. You have a couple of really good wide receivers in Bailey Gaither and Isaiah Henney, a solid 1-2 punch at wide receiver. It's just unfortunate you don't have an offensive line to give you the time to get the football to them in plays that maybe extend a little bit more vertically down the field. But ultimately, keep the passing game quick. The Gamblers' biggest flaw has been defending the pass. They allow about 205 yards a game through the air. They are not great when it comes to defending that. So if you can keep the pass game quick and steady and you can establish something on the ground, you at least give yourself a chance. Now, defensively for the Maulers, I think two things really stick out to me here. First and foremost, you need to have an answer for Mark Thompson and force Kenji Bahar into a situation where he's throwing the football more than you want him to. I think Kenji Bahar has done a really good job taking care of the football this year after those first few weeks where things were a little bit hectic and he had 8 turnovers or something like that through the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year. But once, they kind of took the ball out of his hands just enough so that it wasn't like the Kenji Bahar show and Mark Thompson came in and your offense became more balanced and you forced defense to become more more honest and force them to kind of stack the box a little bit more so things open up more downfield. I really think that this offense is one that can be very threatening, but if you're able to at least come up with an answer to Mark Thompson like the Showboats did last week, Kenji Bahar ended up going 18 of 39. He threw the ball nearly 40 times last week, one pass short. He ended up with just a 46.2 completion percentage and 2 interceptions. If you can, again, make it that Kenji Bahar show, listen, I think Kenji Bahar has done an excellent job, especially taking care of the football the last handful of weeks prior to the game against the Showboats. But it's clear that if you put too much weight on his shoulders, things can get out of hand. He might start throwing and forcing passes where you don't necessarily want the ball to go. And I think that's a good recipe for stopping this team. You got to find an answer. And you have a Maulers defense that is excellent against the run. If there's a team that can bring an answer for Mark Thompson, it's going to be the Maulers. As for just one other piece and just something that I think is really important, save your best plays for third down. This Gamblers team, a big reason for their success this year, they are the best team in the USFL on third down, converting on 52.4% of their third down opportunities. That's more than every other time. So with that in mind, if you can slow them down on third down, you put yourself in a much better situation, especially for an offense that just has not been great at getting the football into the end zone this year. The Showboats last week, they put the Gamblers in a real tough spot. They held them to just 30% on their conversion rate for third down, going 4 for 13 in total on the day. With the makeup of the Maulers right now, winning on third down is, I wouldn't even say a little thing. It's crucial to keep yourself in a game like this. And if there's a defense that you can kind of rely on, it's going to be the Maulers. As for who I think comes out victorious in this game and ultimately wins, this one was not necessarily too hard for me to come up with, and I'm going to go with the Houston Gamblers. I'm probably going to eat my words for saying that because every single time I say something that feels definitive in my opinion, I end up getting it wrong. But I say that because I'm just, at this point, unable to put my belief in the Maulers anymore. I feel like I've really enjoyed watching them, especially evolve with Troy Williams under center. But at this point, there's just too many inconsistencies and glaring, obvious ways to kind of shut down what they're doing for me to really buy into them, especially against a Gamblers team that for the most part this year has been really good on offense, minus turnovers. And if the Gamblers get going, I know that the Maulers just had 31 points last week in quite a wild game against the Stars, but the Stars defense has also been kind of wishy-washy here or there, depending on the game. And I don't necessarily know if I can I don't buy into the Stars defense that much, I guess you could say. So for the game to kind of get out of hand like that, I don't want to say it's not too surprising, but it is what it is. You're going up against the Gamblers unit that on defense has been really good. Yes, they've struggled against the pass, but you're not a great passing team as the Maulers. So I just feel like I'm a lot more comfortable with the Gamblers more than anything else. I have them winning 26-20 though. I think it's a closer game. I do think that the Maulers defense does give the Gamblers some more trouble. I would be shocked if they didn't. Again, they're really good at rushing the passer. They're excellent at stopping the run. And we saw what happened last week with the Gamblers. If you end up shutting down their running game and make them a little more one-dimensional, you have a shot as the Maulers, but I don't quite know if the offense is going to be there to be able to help them secure that upset victory. As for the other game that we're looking at here, this one, the later of the two at 3 p.m. Eastern time, this one will be in Birmingham, Alabama. It's going to be Alabama. It's going to be a whiteout game for the Stallions, their final home game of the year as they take on and host the Stars. So here's the deal, and this is on NBC and Peacock if you're looking to watch. Again, that's 3 p.m. Eastern time, NBC and Peacock. The Stars come into this game red hot, and I can't believe I'm saying that because this is, again, another team in a situation where a few weeks ago I would have been shocked if anyone told me that, hey, the Stars are about to rattle off 3 straight wins going into a game against the Stallions that is going to be massive for them. But they own the North right now, riding that 3-game winning streak at 4-3. And then you have the Stallions who come off a massive redemption game against the Breakers, one that, I felt like they had circled since their first meeting with the Breakers, obviously allowing the Breakers to surpass 40-plus points in a victory over them. This was a really big game for them and one that clearly meant a lot, and they are currently sitting at number 1 in the USFL in my power rankings, in a lot of people's power rankings, and in the standings, sitting at 5-2 right now, looking to make that repeat run as champions. So the Stars, I think offensively, I can really sum up what they need to do in 2 words: stay balanced. This offense clicks and runs a lot better when they're committed to running the football and they're working the field when the things start to open up because they've committed to running the football. And another thing that I have in my notes here, focusing on dialing up both Corey Coleman, stud wide receiver, and their running back, Matt Colburn. I don't feel like they've schemed enough around Matt Colburn this season, and I really feel like that's a big reason why the North Division is a little bit tighter than I think it should be, especially with just the amount of talent the Stars have and the potential explosiveness of the offense. They sometimes feel like, it feels like they forget that Matt Colburn is there, but when he becomes involved and gets going for the offense, things just open wide up, and that offense is as productive as any in the USFL, in my opinion. If you can just stay balanced, and again, you make sure you are including Matt Colburn in the run game and in the passing game, because he can catch out of the backfield too, and they have not really done that enough with him this year, in my opinion, as well. Between just him and Corey Coleman, they combined for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns in last week's win. When you needed guys to count on, Colburn and Coleman were there for you. Those are the guys that you want to focus your offense around. It opens things up for other guys. Think of like Gray. He had an excellent game last week beside Corey Coleman with 75 yards to match Corey Coleman's 75 yards. Get those 2 guys involved early and make sure that you continue to feed them through the game. And I think you have a really strong offense and one that's tough to deal with and one that can bring it to a Stallions defense that's been very impressive this year. As for the defensive side of things, there's kind of a lot to look at here because the Stallions are a very good team just from top to bottom on both the offense and defensive side of the ball. But when you're talking about dealing with the offense, your first and foremost, this is like, if there is anything that you are going into this game thinking about doing, it is trying to figure out a way to contain Alex Magoo and bring him down. Do not let him extend the plays and use his legs, because he will beat you, and he will, even if he's having a tough first half, if he even catches a bit of fire, he will burn you in the second half. The Stallions right now, they're like middle of the road with sacks allowed at 14 this year. And I will say this, the Stars pass rush has not necessarily been consistent, but they're coming off a game in which they had 5 against a unit that has struggled so far this year from the beginning to all the way to this point against the Maulers. If you can bring some of that momentum with you into this next game here, and you're dealing with, again, another mobile quarterback, they dealt with one last week as well. If you can go after him, bring him down maybe 2-3 times this game, you stand a chance. But at this point, you need to just kind of contain Alex McGough as much as possible, because he is on a tear and on an MVP run like no one else in the USFL at this point. Second thing you have to keep in mind, and I think that you got a good example of this last week, because you can't forget about him, but the Stallions just have had so much success in other ways, they have not really needed to rely on him, is do not forget to account for CJ Marable, the running back for the Stallions here. He had 138 total yards against the Breakers last week, and he is somebody that is talented, and he can be that guy with those numbers, I think, week in and week out. But there's so much talent you can rely on in this team, but do not let him do what he did to the Breakers last week, because I think he was a big deciding factor in that victory. If there was somebody that you needed to go through, whether it was on the ground or through the air, the Stallions were able to find Marable a ton of times for a ton of yards last week. So account for him. Don't forget that he's there, because that kind of feels like something that the Breakers did miss on. You're so concerned dealing with, wide receiver Davian Davis and tight end Jay Sternberger that, you forget about some of those lesser guys, quote unquote, but the roster is stacked over there in Birmingham, and just make sure you are accounting for everyone that's there. CJ Marable might not have had the most impressive season up to this point, but he has the talent, and he reminded everyone last week of what he can do out of the backfield for the Stallions. As for the Stallions going into this game here, what do they need to do if they want to come out victorious in this matchup? Well, first and foremost, attack that Stars front seven. They have been abysmal defending the run this year, with a league-high 132 yards per game allowed. CJ Marable, like I said, he reminded you of his worth, and of that 138 yards he had last week, he had 82 yards that were on the ground. Don't be afraid to try to run the football with him a little bit more this week, especially coming off of a game where, he's built some momentum now, and you're going up against the league's worst run defense. Go after the Stars. Make them fight you up front, because I don't quite know if the Stars will be able to manage. You have a really good offensive line over there when it comes to running the football for the Stallions. So I think if you can be aggressive on the ground, get physical up front, and take it to that front seven, you might be able to beat the Stars in a way that maybe they're not even anticipating you to try to beat them, just because of how poor they handle that, but also with just how good you are in a litany of other ways offensively. Maybe just getting physical up front is a good route to go. But if you're not doing that, just let Alex McGough do his thing. I think at this point now, there's no real reason to kind of have any concerns about just letting Alex McGough cook, as everyone seems to be saying these days. He's on an MVP type tear. So, if you're not going to lean into something like CJ Marable, maybe surprising the Stars with, his resurgence during last week's game, just let Alex McGough do his thing. I feel like the offense kind of lives and dies by him right now. He's very good at finding those stars that you have on offense, and if you're not going to scheme up anything fancy against the Stars defense that can't seem to stop a nosebleed when it comes to running the football, then just let McGough do his thing. As for the defense, I think there's a couple of things that I would really like to see from them, and I think important things when it comes into this game here. First and foremost, your front seven. We were just talking about the Stars. Your front seven, go ahead and expose that offensive line for what it is. I feel like the Stars' offensive line has been looking a little bit better the last few weeks, but I will say this. You're going up against a Stallions team that hasn't necessarily been great at bringing down the quarterback by any means, but this Stars O-line, under the pressure against a good team, I could see your front seven maybe being able to make them crack and having themselves a really good game. The Stars' offensive line has allowed a whopping 23 sacks this season. Again, if there was ever a game for your pass rush to get fire, and the Stallions can generate pressure, I just feel like they've struggled when it comes to actually bringing the quarterback down. If there was ever a game for them to really have a coming out party and build some big momentum as you push your way into the final few weeks for the playoffs, this is the game. The second thing, and I kind of talked about this a lot with the Stars offensively, but I think it goes double for the Stallions defense. You need to account for Matt Colburn and bottle him up, because if there's one thing that I have been adamant about this whole season while watching the Stars play, it is that this team is a much better team when Matt Colburn is doing his thing. He's catching the ball out of the backfield. He's running the football effectively, and he's able to be a contributor in this offense. Things start to open up. Defenses become more honest. They also have to stack the box a little bit more. If he gets going on the ground, you have to account for him because Colburn is talented. He is a talented running back. He's a fantastic athlete and someone that with the ball in his hands can make you pay. If you can bottle him up, you make this offense one-dimensional. You can take advantage of that struggling offensive line if the Stars get behind and start to really bring the pressure and get Case Cookus in that situation where, he's uncomfortable forcing mistakes, or maybe he doesn't even have the opportunity to force mistakes because you're bringing him down. Bottle up Matt Colburn. He should be the guy that you have circled here. I know that we have guys like Coleman on that offense there. Gray is another example, but if there's one guy that I really think helps get this Stars offense going and determines whether it's going to be a good game offensively altogether for the Stars, it is running back Matt Colburn. And I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves. When he's doing well, the Stars offense is doing well. As for who I think is going to come out victorious in this game here, this is a championship rematch from last year. A lot of people are looking forward to this game, myself included. When we talked about the schedule release so many months ago, I had this game circled as one of my favorite games, looking forward to it, and we are finally here. You have the Stars in Stallions in a championship rematch, and I'm going to go with the Birmingham Stallions for the victory in this one here. I think they take down the Stars. This is not the same Stars team that was bringing it to them last year in that championship game that ultimately came to a crash and burn when Case Cookus went down with his leg injury. I think the Stallions just have a far more well-structured offense, and they also know what they are offensively, whereas the Stars they're on like a roller coaster. And yes, they're on a 3-game winning streak right now, but they have just been a team that has been very hot to cold to hot again. And have they really found themselves at this point? Are they the definitive team in the North? Are they that number one team? I don't quite know yet, but I do know what the Stallions are. Great defense that is very bend but don't break mentality, and a team that has just so much talent offensively that if they're not beating you one way, they're beating you another way, and they can rely on a litany of guys to beat you in each and every single way and help Alex Magoo lead that team to a victory. So I feel comfortable with the Stallions coming away with the victory here, but I think it's going to be a fun game. I have the Stallions winning 30-27. I think it comes down very close to the end of the game, but ultimately I give the Stallions that slight edge in a tight victory and in a game that repeats what we saw from the championship game last year. An exciting finish, a tight one up until the very end. But that is it for me. If you made it through the entire video, I greatly appreciate it. Again, comment down below. Let me know who you think comes out victorious in week number 8 for Saturday's games. I'll have Sunday's picks out tomorrow, but that is it for me. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.